My name is Elena, and I'm 49 years old. I spent 5 long years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. I took the blame for my husband because I thought love meant loyalty. But when I finally came home, ready to start again, I didn't walk into freedom. I walked into his funeral. The man who promised to wait for me had already buried his own truth, and karma got to him before I ever could. Before I tell you how everything fell apart, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Because what I'm about to share might just change the way you think about love, trust, and justice. You know, when you're young, they tell you that love conquers all. They tell you that marriage is about standing by each other through thick and thin. They tell you that real love means sacrifice. And I believed every single word of it. I believed it so deeply that I let it destroy me. Marcus and I were married for 15 years before everything happened. 15 years. That's not nothing. That's over 5,000 days of waking up next to someone, of building a life together, of creating routines and inside jokes and shared memories. We had a son together, Leo. My beautiful boy. He was the light of my life, the reason I breathed, the reason I believed in goodness. I remember the day Marcus came home from work with that look on his face. I'd seen him worried before, stressed before, but this was different. This was fear. Raw, naked fear. He sat me down at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten 1,000 meals together, where Leo had done his homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, and he told me that there was a problem at work. A financial irregularity, he called it. Such clean, corporate words for what was really theft. He worked for a mid-sized investment firm, nothing too fancy, but respectable, good benefits, stable income, or so I thought. Turns out, money had been moving in ways it shouldn't have been moving. Accounts had been manipulated. Numbers had been changed, and Marcus's name was all over it. I remember asking him, "Did you do it?" And he looked at me with those eyes that I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Those same eyes that had looked at me on our wedding day, that had looked at our son the moment he was born. And he said, "It's complicated, Elena. It's so much more complicated than that." But here's the thing about complicated. Complicated is just another word for guilty when you're trying to avoid the truth. He explained to me that if he went to prison, we'd lose everything. The house, his pension, our son's stability. He said that Leo needed his father, that a boy needs his dad around. And then he said something that changed my entire life. He said, "But if you took the fall for this, just for a short time, they'd go easier on you. First-time offender, a mother, they'd be lenient. Maybe 18 months, 2 years maximum. And I could keep working, keep the house, take care of Leo. And when you came home, we'd start fresh. I promise, Elena. I promise I'll make this right." I sat there, stunned. He was asking me to go to prison, to leave my child, to take the blame for something I didn't do. And you know what the worst part was? I actually considered it. I actually sat there and thought about it like it was a reasonable request. He kept talking, kept explaining, kept painting this picture of how it would all work out. He said he'd visit every week. He said he'd bring Leo to see me. He said he'd write me letters every single day. He said he'd wait for me, that our love was strong enough to survive this. He called it a sacrifice. He called it temporary. He called it the only way to save our family. And God help me, I believed him. I remember looking at Leo's school photo on the refrigerator. He was 6 years old then. Still had that gap-toothed smile. Still believed in superheroes and magic. Still thought his mom could do anything. And I thought, if I go to prison, he'll still have his father. He'll still have his home. He'll still have stability. But if Marcus goes, we lose everything. So I said yes. I said yes to a lie that would cost me 5 years of my life. I said yes to a sacrifice that no one should ever have to make. I said yes because I thought that's what love looked like. The legal process happened so fast, it made my head spin. Marcus's lawyer, who became my lawyer, coached me on what to say, how to plead, how to show remorse for something I didn't do. I stood in that courtroom and I lied. I lied to the judge. I lied to the prosecutor. I lied to everyone. I said I did it. I said I was sorry. I said I took full responsibility. The judge looked at me with something like pity and sentenced me to 7 years. 7 years. Not the 18 months Marcus had promised, not the 2 years maximum. 7 full years. I almost collapsed right there in the courtroom. But Marcus's lawyer immediately started talking about good behavior, about early release, about how I'd probably serve only 4 or 5 years if I kept my head down. 4 or 5 years. My son would be 10 or 11 when I got out. I'd miss his entire childhood, his first day of middle school, his soccer games, his birthday parties, everything. I remember the day they took me away. I hugged Leo so tight I thought I might break him. He was crying, asking why Mommy had to go away. Marcus told him that Mommy made a mistake, but that she'd be home soon. Soon. That word became a knife that twisted in my heart every single day. Prison is... There aren't really words for what prison does to you. It's not just the loss of freedom, though that's devastating enough. It's the way time moves differently in there. Hours stretch into days. Days blur into weeks. Weeks collapse into months. You lose track of who you were before. You become a number, a routine, a body moving through space. I kept my head down like the lawyer said. I didn't cause trouble. I followed the rules. I worked in the prison library, shelving books and helping other inmates with their legal research. I became friendly with a few women, though you learn quickly in prison that friendship is a luxury you can't always afford. Marcus visited for the first few months. He'd bring Leo, and we'd sit in that awful visiting room with the fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial cleaner and desperation. Leo would tell me about school, about his friends, about the new video game he got. He'd show me drawings he made. And Marcus would hold my hand across the table and tell me he loved me, that he was counting down the days until I came home. But then the visits started to become less frequent. First it was every week, then every other week, then once a month. Marcus always had an excuse. Work was busy. Leo had a soccer game. The car broke down. There was a family emergency. Always something. The letters he'd promised to write every day, I got maybe one a month, and they became shorter and shorter, less personal, more like obligation than love. I tried to call home. The prison allowed us phone calls, though they were expensive and monitored and limited, but more and more often, no one answered. Or Marcus would answer and say he couldn't talk right now, he'd call me back. He never called back. Leo stopped coming to visit entirely after the first year. Marcus said it was too hard on him, too confusing, that his therapist recommended giving him space. His therapist. My baby needed therapy because I was gone, and I wasn't even there to help him through it. The loneliness in prison is a living thing. It crawls under your skin and makes a home there. It whispers to you late at night when you're lying on that thin mattress staring at the ceiling. It tells you that you're forgotten, that you don't matter, that the world is moving on without you. I started marking days on a calendar I kept hidden under my mattress. Little X's for each day that passed. I'd count them obsessively, doing the math over and over. If I got out for good behavior after 5 years, Leo would be 11. Still young enough to need his mother. Still young enough to remember me. That hope was the only thing that kept me going. I imagined my release day constantly. I'd picture walking out those gates, seeing Marcus and Leo waiting for me. I'd imagine Leo running into my arms, taller than I remembered but still my baby boy. I'd imagine Marcus apologizing for the distance, for the silence, explaining that it was just too painful but that he never stopped loving me. I'd imagine us going home together, being a family again, Those daydreams got me through the darkest moments, through the fights that broke out in the cafeteria, through the nights when my cellmate would cry herself to sleep, through the suffocating realization that my son was growing up without me. Year 2 passed. Then year 3. I applied for every early release program they had. I took classes. I did everything right. And finally, in my 5th year, I got the news. I was being released for good behavior. After 5 years, I was going home. I couldn't believe it. I read the letter over and over until the words blurred. I had a release date, a specific day when I would walk out of that prison and reclaim my life. I tried to call Marcus to tell him the good news. No answer. I tried again the next day, and the next. Nothing. I wrote him a letter, with the date, sent it priority. Surely he'd respond to this. Surely he'd want to know when his wife was coming home. But I never heard back. I told myself he was planning a surprise, that he didn't want to spoil it by talking to me beforehand, that he and Leo were preparing the house, getting everything ready for my return. I clung to that fantasy because the alternative was too horrible to consider. The day of my release finally came. March 14th, a Tuesday. I'll never forget it. I woke up at 4 a.m. Even though I didn't have to be processed until 8. I couldn't sleep. I was too nervous, too excited, too terrified. They gave me back the clothes I'd worn when I came in 5 years earlier. They didn't fit anymore. I'd lost weight in prison, and the jeans hung loose on my hips. The shirt was faded and smelled like mothballs. But they were civilian clothes, not prison-issued, and that meant freedom. I signed papers. So many papers. They gave me a manila envelope with my personal effects, my wedding ring, which I immediately slipped back on my finger, my old driver's license, which showed a version of me that no longer existed, 44 years old in the photo, 49 now. The woman in that picture had hope in her eyes. The woman in the mirror looked haunted. And then I walked. I walked through the processing area, through the security checkpoint, through the gates, and out. The air outside smelled different, fresher, sweeter, free. I stood there for a moment just breathing it in, feeling the sun on my face, real sunshine, not filtered through bars and reinforced glass. I looked around, expecting to see Marcus's car, expecting to see him waiting for me. But the parking lot was nearly empty, just a few other cars, probably belonging to other people getting released, or guards changing shifts. He wasn't there. I waited for an hour, standing there with my envelope of belongings, watching cars come and go, each time hoping it would be him, but he never came. Finally, I used some of the $27 they'd given me upon release to take a bus toward home. The world had changed in 5 years. New buildings I didn't recognize. Stores that used to be there were gone. Everything felt familiar and foreign at the same time. I got off the bus 3 blocks from our house. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Every step felt heavy, weighted with 5 years of longing and hope and fear. And then I saw it. Our house. The little 2-story with the blue shutters that we'd painted together one summer. Except the shutters weren't blue anymore. They were gray. And the garden I'd planted in the front yard was gone, replaced with plain grass. And the mailbox had a different name on it. I stood there staring, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe Marcus had remarried. Maybe he'd moved on, thinking I'd be gone for the full 7 years. The thought made me sick, but I pushed it away. I just needed to see my son. Even if Marcus had moved on, Leo was still my child. I still had that right. I walked up to the front door. My hand shook as I rang the doorbell. I could hear movement inside, footsteps, and then the door opened. And there he was, Leo, my baby. Except he wasn't a baby anymore. He was 11 years old, tall and lean, with Marcus's nose in my eyes. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Mommy?" he whispered. I started crying immediately. Leo, baby, it's me. I'm home. I'm finally home. He didn't move, just stood there, frozen, staring at me with wide eyes. And then I heard another voice behind him. Leo, who's at the door? Marcus appeared, and when he saw me, all the color drained from his face. He looked like he might faint. He grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. Elena? He breathed. No. No. This isn't possible. Marcus, I'm home, I said, my voice breaking. I got released early. I tried to call. I sent a letter. You can't be here. He interrupted, his voice rising. You can't be here. This isn't possible. Elena, you died. I stared at him, not understanding. What are you talking about? I'm right here. I'm alive. I just got released today. He shook his head violently. No, you died 10 months ago. The prison called me. They said you had a heart condition. They said you collapsed in your cell. They said you were gone. My legs went weak. That's insane. I'm standing right here. I'm alive. Marcus disappeared into the house and came back moments later with a piece of paper. His hands were shaking as he held it up. A death certificate, with my name on it, Elena Marie Thompson. Date of death, May 3rd of the previous year. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. This is a mistake, I said, my voice rising. This is wrong. I'm not dead. Look at me. They sent your body home, Marcus said. And he was crying now too. We had a funeral. We buried you. I watched them lower your casket into the ground, Elena. The world tilted. I grabbed onto the doorframe to keep from falling. You buried me? You buried me? How could you bury me when I was still alive? I didn't know, he shouted. They sent official documentation. The prison warden called me personally. They said it was you. How was I supposed to know? And then another figure appeared behind Marcus. A woman. Young, maybe 30, pretty, pregnant, very pregnant, and wearing a wedding ring. She looked at me with confusion and fear. Marcus, what's going on? Who is this? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I looked at Marcus, at this woman, at my son standing between them, and I understood. He'd moved on. He'd remarried. He'd started a whole new life. While I was rotting in a cell for a crime he committed, he'd replaced me. You son of a bitch, I whispered. You actually did it. You actually replaced me. Sophia, take Leo upstairs, Marcus said to the woman. Now. No, I screamed. That's my son. Leo, baby. It's me. It's Mommy. I'm alive. I'm here. But Leo looked terrified. He didn't know me anymore. 5 years was a lifetime for a child. I was a stranger to him now. Sophia ushered Leo away, and I heard his voice asking, Is that really Mommy? I thought Mommy was dead. Marcus stepped outside and closed the door behind him. Elena, I don't know what's going on, but you need to leave. You're scaring my family. Your family? I laughed. A horrible, broken sound. Your family? I'm your family, Marcus. I'm your wife. Or did you forget that while I was in prison for your crime? Keep your voice down, he hissed, looking around nervously. The neighbors. I don't give a damn about the neighbors, I screamed. I went to prison for you. I gave up 5 years of my life for you. And you couldn't even wait for me? You had me declared dead so you could move on? I didn't declare you dead, he said. The prison did. They sent me documentation. They sent me your body. I held your funeral. I grieved you, Elena. But not for long, apparently, I spat. How long did you wait before you moved her in? How long before you put another woman in my bed, in my house, with my son? He had the decency to look ashamed. I was alone. Leo needed a mother figure. And I thought you were gone, Elena. I genuinely thought you were dead. Well, I'm not, I said. I'm very much alive. And I want my life back. I want my son back. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, I shouted. I'm his mother. I have rights. You're a convicted felon, Marcus said quietly. You signed away custody rights when you were sentenced. The ground fell away beneath me. You made me do that. You promised it was temporary. You promised you'd wait. I did wait, he said. I waited until you died. But I didn't die! My voice was hoarse from screaming. I'm here. I'm alive. This is some kind of mistake, some kind of bureaucratic error, and we need to fix it. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. This is harassment. Harassment? I'm your wife. My wife is dead, he said, and the coldness in his voice cut deeper than any knife. My wife was buried 10 months ago. I don't know who you are or what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but you need to leave before I have you arrested. I couldn't believe this was happening. This couldn't be real. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw the truth. Part of him knew it was really me. Part of him recognized me, knew I was telling the truth. But he'd built a new life, and I was an inconvenience, an obstacle, a ghost that should have stayed buried. The police came. Marcus must have called them before stepping outside. 2 officers, young, professional, polite. They asked for my identification. I showed them my release papers, my old driver's license. They looked at each other with confusion. One of them made a phone call, then another. I heard him say words like deceased and released and don't understand. They took me to the police station. Not under arrest, they said, just to sort things out. But I sat in an interrogation room for 4 hours while they made phone calls and pulled up records and tried to make sense of a woman who was simultaneously alive and dead. Finally, a detective came in. Older woman, kind eyes but tired. She sat across from me and laid out several pieces of paper. Miss Thompson, she said, I've been reviewing your case. According to the Department of Corrections, you died 10 months ago of cardiac arrest. They have a death certificate signed by the prison doctor, a coroner's report, everything. Your body was released to your next of kin for burial. But I'm alive, I said for what felt like the 100th time. I was in that prison until this morning. I was released for good behavior. I have the paperwork. She looked at the release papers, and I saw confusion flicker across her face. These appear to be legitimate, she said slowly. But according to our system, you shouldn't exist. You're listed as deceased in every database I can access. Then someone made a mistake, I said. Or someone lied. That's a pretty significant mistake, she said. Declaring someone dead when they're alive, that doesn't just happen accidentally. Then what are you saying? She leaned back in her chair. I'm saying I don't know. This is unprecedented in my 20 years on the force. I need to make some more calls. In the meantime, do you have somewhere to stay? I almost laughed. My husband thinks I'm dead and remarried someone else. So no, I don't have anywhere to stay. She gave me the address of a homeless shelter that specialized in recently released inmates. She told me to come back tomorrow and they'd hopefully have more answers. The shelter was exactly what you'd expect. Rows of cots, shared bathrooms, the smell of too many unwashed bodies in too small a space. I lay on a thin mattress that night, staring at the ceiling, and wondered if I'd actually gone insane. Maybe I had died. Maybe this was hell. The next morning, I went back to the police station. They had more questions, but no answers. They confirmed that, yes, I was released from prison yesterday. But they also confirmed that, yes, according to every official record, I died 10 months earlier. Someone needs to fix this, I said desperately. Someone needs to tell the truth. We're working on it, the detective said. But Miss Thompson, I need you to understand something. Right now, legally, you don't exist. You can't work. You can't rent an apartment. You can't access any benefits or services. Until we can sort out this discrepancy, you're essentially a ghost. A ghost? That's exactly what I felt like. I spent the next week trying to unravel the mystery of my own death. I went to the cemetery where Marcus said I was buried, and there it was, a headstone with my name on it. Elena Marie Thompson, beloved wife and mother, died too soon. I stood there staring at my own grave, and something inside me broke. I fell to my knees on the grass and I wept. Not quiet tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere primal and wounded. I went to the funeral home that had handled my burial. The director was an older man with practiced sympathy. He showed me the records. A sealed casket had been delivered from the prison. He'd prepared it for burial according to the family's wishes. Close casket, Marcus had requested. He said he wanted everyone to remember me as I was. "Can you exhume the body?" I asked. "Can you dig it up and prove that it's not me?" He looked uncomfortable. "That would require a court order and a compelling reason. And honestly, ma'am, I don't even know how you'd begin that process when you're legally deceased." I felt like I was going insane. Every door I knocked on closed in my face. Every person I tried to tell looked at me like I was crazy. The system said I was dead, and who was I to argue with the system? I went back to the prison, stood outside those gates I'd walked through just days earlier. I asked to speak to someone in administration. They made me wait for 3 hours before someone finally came out. It was a woman I didn't recognize, someone from the warden's office. She looked at my release papers, at my face, and her expression went very carefully blank. "There must be some mistake," she said. "Yes," I agreed. "A big mistake. Your prison declared me dead when I was very much alive." "I'll need to look into this," she said. "This is highly irregular." Irregular? I laughed bitterly. That's one word for it. How about illegal? How about criminal? You people told my family I was dead. They buried someone. Who did they bury? If it wasn't me. Whose body was in that casket? She paled. "I don't have those answers right now, but I promise you, we'll investigate." "I spent 5 years in your prison," I said. 5 years of my life. And when I finally got out, I found out I'd been declared dead. My husband remarried. My son doesn't know me. My life is gone. Someone needs to be held accountable for this. She gave me a number to call, a lawyer who handled cases for former inmates. Then she went back inside those gates and left me standing there. I called the lawyer. Her name was Nadia Keller, and she worked for a legal aid organization. When I told her my story, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Miss Thompson," she finally said, "if what you're telling me is true, this is one of the most egregious violations I've ever heard of. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" I met with Nadia the next day. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and an air of determination. She listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes. "Okay," she said when I finished. "Here's what I think happened. Someone at the prison made a mistake, or covered up something, or possibly both. They declared you deceased, sent your family a body that wasn't yours, and closed your file. But somehow, your release paperwork was still processed, because that was probably handled by a different department that didn't know you were supposedly dead. So what do I do?" "We start by getting you legally alive again," she said. "We petition the court to overturn the death certificate. We'll need evidence, fingerprints, DNA, witnesses who can confirm you were in that prison until last week. And then we figure out what really happened, and we make someone pay for it." I liked Nadia. She was the first person who believed me, who didn't look at me like I was crazy or a scammer or a ghost. We started gathering evidence. Nadia requested my prison records, though they were slow to comply. She arranged for me to be fingerprinted and for DNA samples to be taken. She found inmates I'd been friendly with who could testify that I was alive and present in the prison until the day of my release. And then something unexpected happened. A journalist contacted me. Her name was Freya Novak, and she worked for an investigative news outlet. Somehow, she'd heard about my case. "Miss Thompson," she said when we met at a coffee shop. I've been investigating irregularities at the Department of Corrections for 2 years. Your case is explosive. If what you're saying is true, it means someone at that prison committed fraud, falsified official documents, and possibly worse. I want to tell your story. I don't want to be famous, I said. I just want my life back. I understand that. But public pressure can move mountains. If I write about this, if people know what happened to you, it puts pressure on the system to make it right. Will you let me interview you? I agreed. What did I have to lose? I was already a ghost. The article ran 2 weeks later. Freya was a good writer. She laid out my story in clear, devastating detail. Woman goes to prison for husband's crime, gets released only to find she's been declared dead and replaced. The headline was sensational but accurate. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The story went viral. News stations picked it up. People started calling for investigations. Lawyers I'd never met contacted Nadia offering to help. And finally, the Inspector General's office got involved. They assigned an investigator named Lucia Caruso to my case. She was thorough and relentless, and she didn't care about protecting the system. She cared about the truth. Over the next few weeks, Lucia uncovered what had really happened. It was worse than I'd imagined. A mailroom supervisor at the prison named Marta Varga had been systematically intercepting and destroying inmate correspondence. She and her husband, Tomas, who worked in the medical records department, had been running a small-scale corruption scheme, selling favors and information. When another inmate, a woman named Jennifer Cross, who had no family and no visitors, died of a genuine heart attack, Marta saw an opportunity. She switched our records, declared me dead instead of Jennifer, sent my family Jennifer's body, and kept me listed as alive in the system just enough to avoid immediate red flags, but isolated enough that my letters and calls never got through. Why? Because she'd promised someone on the outside that she could make an inmate disappear from contact, and she'd been paid for it. She thought I'd just rot in there with no outside communication until my full sentence was up. And by then, who would question it? But she hadn't counted on me getting early release. When I was approved for release, a different department processed it. One that didn't know I was supposedly dead. The system was so fragmented that the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. When Lucia Caruso laid all this out for me, sitting in Nadia's office, I felt cold. Someone had stolen my identity, my death, my life, for money, for a petty corruption scheme. My son had grown up thinking I was dead because someone wanted to make a quick profit. Where are they now? I asked. Marta and Tomas? In custody, Lucia said. They'll be charged with fraud, falsifying government documents, and several other crimes. They're looking at serious prison time. Good, I said. And I meant it. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted them to lose years of their lives. I wanted them to understand what they'd taken from me. But even with the truth coming out, my problems weren't solved. I was still legally dead. I still couldn't see my son. Marcus still had a new wife and a baby on the way. Nadia filed a petition with the court to have my death certificate overturned. She presented the DNA evidence, the testimony from prison inmates and guards, the fingerprint matches, the evidence Lucia had uncovered. It should have been simple. It should have been obvious. But nothing in the legal system is simple. It took 3 months of hearings and motions and legal wrangling. 3 months of living in that shelter, of being a non-person, of watching the world move around me while I was stuck in legal limbo. During that time, I wrote to Marcus. A real letter, sent through Nadia to make sure it actually reached him. I told him everything. The conspiracy, the corruption, the truth. I told him I forgave him for believing I was dead, but I couldn't forgive him for moving on so quickly. I told him I wanted to see my son. He didn't respond for weeks, but finally he did. He asked if we could meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to keep hating him, wanted to nurse that anger like a flame. But another part of me, The part that still remembered 15 years of marriage, of love, of building a life together. That part was curious. I arrived early and sat in the corner, watching the door. When Marcus walked in, I barely recognized him. He'd aged, like I had, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. He looked tired. He saw me and stopped. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the coffee shop. Then he walked over and sat down across from me. "Elena," he said quietly, I don't even know what to say." "How about I'm sorry?" I suggested, and my voice came out harder than I intended. "I am sorry," he said, "for all of it, for asking you to take the fall in the first place, for not being there for you in prison the way I should have been, for believing you were dead when maybe I should have questioned it more." "You remarried pretty quickly," I said. He had the grace to look ashamed. "I was lonely. Leo was struggling. And Sophia, she worked at his school. She was kind to him, to both of us. It wasn't planned, Elena. I genuinely thought you were gone. But I wasn't." "No," he agreed. "You weren't." We sat in silence for a moment. I studied his face, looking for the man I'd loved. He was still in there, somewhere, under all the years and guilt and choices. "I want to see Leo," I said finally. "I know I can't just walk back into his life. I know he thinks I'm dead, but he deserves to know the truth. He deserves to know his mother is alive." Marcus nodded slowly. "I agree, but we have to do this carefully. He's been through a lot. First losing you, or thinking he lost you, then adjusting to Sophia. Now he's about to have a baby sister. I don't want to traumatize him more." "I would never hurt him," I said fiercely. "He's my son." "I know," Marcus said. "I know you wouldn't. That's why I'm here. I want to help you, Elena. I want to make this right, as much as I can." Tears pricked my eyes. It was the first kind thing anyone connected to my old life had said to me since I got out. "There's something else," he said hesitantly. "Sophia and we've been talking about everything, about what I did to you, about the lies, and she's not comfortable staying with me anymore, not knowing that I let you take the fall for my crime. She says she can't respect me after learning that." I should have felt victorious, but instead I just felt sad. More lives damaged, more collateral from choices made years ago. "I'm not asking you to take me back," he said quickly. "I know that's not possible after everything, but I want to help you rebuild your life. I want Leo to know his real mother, and I want to finally tell the truth about what really happened." I stared at him. "You mean confess? To the crime?" "The statute of limitations has passed," he said. "I checked with a lawyer. I can't be prosecuted anymore. But I can set the record straight. I can tell people that you were innocent, that you took the fall for me. I can help you get your conviction overturned." It was something. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to make up for 5 years of my life. But it was something. "Okay," I said. "Let's start there." Over the next few weeks, Marcus worked with Nadia to file a motion to overturn my conviction based on new evidence. Specifically, his confession. He gave a sworn statement admitting that he'd committed the financial crimes and convinced me to take the blame. At the same time, my petition to be declared legally alive was finally heard in court. Nadia presented all the evidence, DNA tests proving I was who I said I was, fingerprint matches, testimony from prison staff who confirmed I'd been incarcerated until my release date. The investigators' report detailing the corruption scheme that led to my wrongful death declaration. The judge, a woman in her 60s with kind but stern eyes, listened to everything. Then, she looked at me directly. "Miss Thompson," she said, "I want you to know that in 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a case quite like this. The failures of the system, the corruption, the sheer bureaucratic incompetence that allowed this to happen are staggering. I am deeply sorry for what you've endured." I held my breath. It is the ruling of this court that the death certificate issued for Elena Marie Thompson is hereby nullified. You are, legally and officially, alive. Your identity is restored. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into the Department of Corrections and recommending federal oversight of their record-keeping procedures. What happened to you should never happen to anyone. I started crying right there in the courtroom. Nadia squeezed my hand. After months of being a ghost, I was finally real again. The judge also overturned my conviction based on Marcus's confession and the evidence that I'd been coerced. My record was cleared. Legally, it was like the whole nightmare had never happened. Except it had happened. I'd still lost 5 years. My son had still grown up without me. I was still a stranger in my own life, but at least now I could start rebuilding. The court also granted me supervised visitation with Leo. Marcus agreed to help facilitate it, to explain to Leo what had happened in age-appropriate terms. Our first visit was at a family therapy center with a counselor present. I was so nervous I thought I might throw up. Leo came in holding Marcus's hand, looking uncertain and afraid. "Hi, Leo," I said softly. I'm your mom." He stared at me. "Dad said you didn't really die. That there was a mistake." "That's right," I said. I was in a place where I couldn't come home for a long time, but I never stopped thinking about you. Not for one single day. "Why didn't you call?" he asked, and the hurt in his voice broke my heart. "I tried, baby. I tried so many times. But the people at that place, they didn't let my calls through. They made a lot of mistakes. But I'm here now." He looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Then he looked back at me. "I remember you," he said quietly. "A little bit. You used to read me stories before bed. About dragons." I smiled through my tears. "Your favorite was the one about the dragon who was afraid of heights." "Yeah," he said, and he smiled a little too. "That one was funny. It wasn't a reunion like in the movies. He didn't run into my arms. We didn't instantly reconnect. But it was a start. A small, fragile, precious start. We had regular visits after that. Once a week at first, then twice a week. Slowly, carefully, I got to know my son again. He told me about school, about his friends, about the video games he liked and the books he was reading. I told him about the future I wanted to build, about getting a job and a place to live and creating a space where he could visit me. It took time, months, but gradually, the awkwardness faded. He started calling me Mom instead of you. He started hugging me goodbye. He started asking when he could see me again. Freya Novak wrote a follow-up article about my case, about the court ruling and my reunion with Leo. The public support had been overwhelming, and several people reached out with job offers. I ended up getting work at a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated people reintegrate into society. It felt right, using my experience to help others. I found a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I decorated it with photos of Leo, building a visual history of the years I'd missed. Marcus sent me pictures from when I was gone. Birthday parties, school events, holidays. It hurt to look at them, to see everything I'd lost. But it also helped me understand who my son had become. Sophia had her baby, a little girl. She and Marcus were trying to work things out, going to counseling. I wished them well, and I meant it. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger took too much energy, and I needed all my energy to rebuild my life. A year after I was released, Leo asked if he could stay overnight at my apartment. Marcus and I discussed it, decided he was ready. That first night, I made him his favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, and we watched movies together. At bedtime, I tucked him into the bed I'd set up in the second bedroom, and he asked if I'd read him a story. "About dragons?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, smiling. "About dragons." I read to him until he fell asleep, and then I sat there watching him breathe, this miracle of a child who was finding his way back to me. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd survived. I thought about the people who'd stolen years of my life and were now in prison themselves. I thought about Marcus and the choices he'd made and the price we'd both paid. And I thought about revenge. I'd wanted it so badly in those early days. I'd wanted to make Marcus suffer, to make the prison pay, to burn down the whole system that had failed me. But revenge hadn't brought me here, to this moment, to my son sleeping peacefully in my home. Truth had brought me here. Justice had brought me here. Perseverance had brought me here. Marcus took my freedom. The system took my identity. Corrupt officials took my dignity. But life, karma, fate, whatever you want to call it, life took care of them in its own way. Marcus lost his wife's respect and nearly lost his family. The corrupt prison workers lost their freedom. The system was being reformed, investigated, held accountable. I didn't have to destroy them. The truth did that for me. I learned something in those dark years, something that I hold on to now. The truth is patient. It waits. It bides its time. But eventually, always, it rises to the surface. You can bury it. You can hide it. You can declare it dead and put a gravestone over it. But truth doesn't stay buried. I didn't get revenge. I got something better. I got my name back. My identity back. My son back. My life back. He took my freedom. Life took his peace. I wanted revenge once. I dreamed about it in that cell, imagined all the ways I could make him pay. But I learned something stronger than revenge. Truth has its own way of returning. It might take years. It might feel impossible. You might lose everything while you're waiting for it. But it never stays buried. Not ever. If you believe that truth always finds its way back, tap that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from tonight? Because somewhere out there, someone else is living through their own nightmare, wondering if justice will ever come. And I want them to know what I learned. It will. Maybe not the way you expect. Maybe not as fast as you want. But truth is stronger than lies. Always. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing me when so many people didn't. And remember, if you're fighting for the truth right now, if you feel like you're screaming into the void and no one is listening, keep going. Keep fighting. Keep telling your truth.